US-Außenminister Antony Blinken hat am vergangenen Wochenende in einem Interview mit der New York Times zugegeben, dass die USA die Ukraine schon vor dem russischen Einmarsch im Februar 2022 mit Waffen ausgerüstet haben. Blinken sagte: Wir haben dafür gesorgt, dass die Ukraine lange vor der russischen Aggression ab September 2021 und dann wieder im Dezember 2021 im Geheimen eine Menge Waffen erhielt, um sicherzustellen, dass sie über das verfügte, was sie zur Verteidigung brauchte. Dinge wie Stingers, Javelins, die entscheidend dazu beitrugen, die Russen zurückzudrängen. Blinken rechtfertigt die Waffenlieferung mit dem Ergebnis, dem russischen Einmarsch in die Ukraine. Was sagst du dazu? War die US-Regierung berechtigt, so zu handeln? Hatte sie das Mandat der US-Bevölkerung dazu?
Tony Blinken is the Secretary of State. He takes his authority from the executive branch of the government, and in the United States, that's the president. And the president has near dictatorial powers when it comes to the formulation and implementation of foreign policy. He does have to seek on certain, situations the advice and consent of the Senate. And of course, anytime money is attached to foreign policy, he has to get that money from the House of Representatives, who therefore leverage the power of the purse into an ability to influence policy. But at the end of the day, as long as there's not a law on the book prohibiting, certain actions, the United States can do anything it wants. You talk about a mandate. There's no mandate. We voted for the American people voted for him, or at least that's the perception. There's some people who say that the 2020 election was stolen, but that's not the question here. The question is, Joe Biden is the president, or is the president of the United States, and he authorized things to be done as part of the policy of the United States. So we don't need to talk about mandates. The mandate was given to him when he was elected. And the U.S. government is always authorized to do what it needs to do in support of foreign policy that it doesn't contradict, laws or the Constitution. And there's nothing about what we're doing in Ukraine that contradicts either. The question is about the legality of what Blinken was doing, but the morality of it. See, he's trying to wrap everything up the same. We were doing the right thing to help Ukraine. He's reinventing history. Never forget that the United States created this problem. Never forget that the United States created this problem. This isn't something where the United States is reacting to Russia. This is about the United States using Ukraine as a tool to bring down Russia. This was the goal, this was the objective. Now listen to what Blinken is saying. We gave them Stingers and Javelins. Do you really think that Stingers and Javelins can defeat the Russian army? No. You see, the goal was never to defeat the Russian army. The goal was to lure Russia into the Ukraine trap. There's an old American folk tale about the tar baby. And basically, once you get it, it becomes a trap and it's stuck to you. Brer Rabbit and all that. But we wanted to make Ukraine a trap for Russia, to lure them. It's part of the way, remember, this is how these people think, these American political elites. What did, Jimmy Carter just died. Everybody's talking about the greatest president, the greatest man, all that. And what he did afterwards as a private citizen deserves credit. But under Jimmy Carter, the United States deliberately built up an Islamist movement in Afghanistan to create a trap for the Soviet Union, a trap that ended up costing millions of people their lives. See, for us, it's just a game. For us, it's just a game of geopolitics, the big game, where fat, stupid idiots can sit in the back room, smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and draw lines on a map. And in doing so, millions of people die. And that's what we did in Afghanistan, and that's what we'd be doing with Ukraine. Tony Blinken is a war criminal, a 100% war criminal, because what he has done is create a situation in Ukraine to provoke a conflict that Ukraine was never going to win. We never wanted Ukraine to win. We never cared about Ukraine. We don't care about Ukraine. How could we care about Ukraine when we created the conditions to create this conflict and over 1 million Ukrainians are dead? So what did he do here? Tony Blinken murdered 1 million Ukrainians. That's the only way to interpret this. This is a war that did not need to be fought. Russia did not want to fight it. The evidence is clear. Putin told Biden in June of 2021 in Geneva, implement Minsk and this goes away. Implement Minsk and this goes away. Minsk was an agreement that Germany agreed upon. So you're blaming too. You're to blame too. France is to blame. England is to blame. Russia's not to blame. But Tony Blinken wants to pretend that Russia's at fault. Well, if France and Germany had implemented Minsk, had been sincere in this, there wouldn't have been a conflict. But they had no intention of it. How do we know? Your stinking Chancellor Angela Merkel admitted it. It was just a sham to buy time to build up a Ukrainian army. François Hollande, another stinking European political elite, admitted it. You're liars. You lie. That's all you did. And your lies led to 1 million dead Ukrainians. I don't want a German or a French person ever again saying, Russia is to blame. No, you're to blame. You did this. You did this. And Russia, even after that, said, we don't want to go to war. And they put draft treaties out there on December 17th talking about the new European security framework that it could avoid a war. NATO ignored it. The United States ignored it. Russia then tried to negotiate directly with the Ukrainians, and they mocked the Russians. So Russia did send their troops in, but the goal was never to occupy Ukraine. This is where Blinken's a liar. The goal was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table, and Russia succeeded. And then you had something called the Istanbul Communique, which was prepared by the end of March that would have brought an end to this conflict. And you, Europeans, stepped in and said no. You sent Boris Johnson in to say no. And this war has gone on now. And 1 million Ukrainians are dead. Tony Blinken is a straight-up war criminal. So is Angela Merkel. So is Olaf Scholz. So is every stinking European politician. You all have the blood of 1 million Ukrainians on your hands. And don't you ever try to pass this off on Russia. Don't you ever try to pass it off on Russia.
Auf den Punkt gefragt, war und ist es ein strategisches Ziel der USA, Europa und insbesondere Deutschland in einen kriegerischen Konflikt mit Russland zu verwickeln?
Why would we want to fight? Why would we want the Germans to fight Russia? I mean, that's like me saying that my goal is to have the local high school football team play the Super Bowl champions of the National Football League. Well, holy cow, what a goal that is. Because the high school team's not going to give it on the field. Germany doesn't have an army, doesn't have a military. Germany has nothing. Hell, you guys put 100 billion euros into Olaf Scholz. You remember? I'm going to get 100 billion euros, and I'm going to build up this great European military. But last year, when the Pistorius came to the European Parliament and said, oh, I need a budget that has, I forget what the percentage rates are, a certain percentage of growth, because we're out of money. That 100 billion, gone. What did it do? Nothing. The German military is still pathetic, and he needed more money to help make the German military less pathetic. And the parliament said, no, we can only give you a small percentage increase, which was less than inflation, which means that the German military is shrinking. So at the time when everybody's posturing about NATO and Germany and the German military, you're shrinking because you can't afford it, because you're a joke, because you're pathetic. And we know this. So why would we ever want you to go to war with Russia? You can't go to war with Russia. What we wanted you to do is destroy your economy in an effort to sustain the Ukrainian tar baby. That's what we wanted you to do, and you did it. Thank you very much, Germany. Really appreciate you guys pouring all that money into Ukraine, which was never about Ukraine winning, always about just trapping Russia into it. And the result is you've destroyed your economy. Hey, Volkswagen, how's it going, pal? How's your factories doing, man? How many people you lay off over the Christmas holidays? I mean, this is cruel of me to say this, but I didn't cause this. Your politicians caused this. How's that energy bill looking? Pretty good, isn't it? I don't know. You guys pay it. You tell me. You happy with the energy bills? You thrilled with the 20% increase that's come in lately? I mean, how's things looking? Pretty steady, right? Germany, strong? No, you're pathetic. I don't mean to pick on you, but my God, what have you allowed to happen? From the moment Olaf Scholz stood there like a cook, as Biden said, I'm going to blow up Nord Stream pipeline, and Olaf Scholz didn't do anything. He said, go ahead and blow it up, destroy my economy. I don't care, because I'm just I'm your cook. Do whatever you want. That's pathetic. And Germany allowed this to happen. Why are you only voting him out now? Why didn't you have a vote of no confidence the moment he stood there and let Joe Biden say, I own you. You're my little puppy dog. I can kick you anytime I want to. But Germans just sat there and let it happen. Only now is there a vote of no confidence. He was the most incompetent chancellor you had, standing there in the White House, stumbling, couldn't even just look around as Biden said, I'm going to blow up the pipeline. A real man would have stood up and said, you will not do anything of the sort, because Germany is a sovereign nation and we need that pipeline for our economy. You do that, you're declaring war on Germany, and you declare war on Germany. I guess get the hell out of my country right now. That's what he should have done, is evict all Americans from Germany at that point in time. That's what a real man would have done when somebody sits there and pisses on your country like Biden did. Scholz isn't a real man, and Germany isn't a real nation until now. Now you finally have a political party, Alternative for Deutschland, that's standing up and saying, Germany counts for something. Germany stands for something. We're going to do something for Germany. Oh, God, but Habeck's scared of that. And you guys are scared of that, so you're going to call them extremists. And then, I don't know. I mean, Germany was never going to fight Russia. Europe was never going to fight Russia. All we wanted you to do is take your money and pour it into a conflict that we knew wasn't going to result in a victory of Europe. What we wanted to do is collapse Russia, destroy Europe, and then we waltz in and we run the whole thing. And that was under Biden. But Biden lied about it. He always lied to you. You know who's the most honest politician in the world today? Donald Trump. He just straight up tells you what he's going to do. There's no subterfuge. Yeah, I'm going to buy Denmark. Well, really? Yeah, going to do it. Panama Canal, that's mine. Really? Yeah. Canada, you're pathetic. You're going to become a state. Yeah. NATO, you're done. Honest. You don't have to like it. You can condemn it. You can say it's wrong. But there's no games here. He's just straight up in your face. And I appreciate that a whole lot more than the lying and the subject. Either be a friend with somebody or you don't. See, I believe America should be Germany's friend. I lived in Germany. I grew up in Germany. And I've always viewed the Germans as a friend of America. But, how can a friend has to earn that friendship. I want to be friends with Germans, with a German nation that stands for something. I don't want to be friends with a bunch of pathetic people that just don't believe in it. That's not, you didn't earn my friendship. And the United States has been pretending to be your friend for so long, and we just use you and abuse you. Finally, you got a guy there, Donald Trump, who's telling you, I'm gonna throw you away because you're not worthy of American friendship. But you know what that means? That if you change the way you behave, you will be worthy of American friendship. And then maybe we can be friends again. And then you say, well, who are you to decide who's worthy? We're America. See, here's the other thing people don't like. America's this, America's that. I agree. Look, I'm one of the harshest critics of the United States. Harshest critics of the United States. I'm not proud of what we've become. But don't pretend that America isn't one of the most powerful nations in the world. Don't pretend that it's not. And all these people out there are picking on America, saying America's this, that. And when Donald Trump stands up and says, no, we're not. Oh my God, you're a bully. Well, yeah, that's who we are. Get used to it, Europe. Get used to it, world. A bully is now taking over a country that's still very powerful. It's up to the American people to control this. I don't know if we're up to that task. But don't think for a moment that America's going away, that America's disappearing. Donald Trump's job is to make America great again. And his vision of being great is expansive.
Lass uns über den Fortgang der russischen Offensive im Donbass sprechen. Kürzlich meldeten die russischen Medien die Einnahme mehrerer Ortschaften im Südwesten von Donezk, darunter auch Kurachowo. Nach Angaben des russischen Verteidigungsministeriums steigen damit Manövermöglichkeiten der russischen Streitkräfte in der gesamten Region. Wie schätzt du die Lage im Donbass ein? Welche Strategie verfolgt Russland? Kann die Ukraine es schaffen, die Lage wieder zu stabilisieren?
The Russian armed forces have captured a number of villages in the Kurakovo region of Donetsk, and it increases the maneuver possibilities of the Russian military. I mean, what more do you want me to say? That's a sound assessment of the military situation. Russia has the strategic, operational, and tactical, advantage, momentum. That statement says it all. That Russia continues to advance. The Ukrainians can't stop them. The Russians are being deliberate in their advance, trying to create greater opportunities of maneuver. If the Ukrainians can't stop the offense that's setting up the greater opportunity to maneuver, then there's little chance they're going to stop the greater maneuver once it begins. So this is Russia dominating the battlefield. Zelensky said the other day that he has 980,000 troops. Okay. I guess Russia's going to have to kill 980,000 more Ukrainians, because that's what's going to happen. Ukraine can't win this war, will not win this war. They can extend this war, but it always cracks me up when I see these people criticize Russia. Russia has mobilized their defense industry, but it's hurting the Russian economy. How? 9.1% inflation. Vladimir Putin took over Russia with 2,500% inflation. You think 9.1 is like a game changer here? It's going to bring down the Russian economy? Not even. It's an overheated economy. There's no doubt about it. Would Russia like to bring it under control? Absolutely. But the defense industry is what keeps Russia in the game. And Russia is going to be in the game for years. Now, how's that European defense industry going? The one that's supposed to mobilize and it's collapsing. The American defense industry can't get its act together. What's going to sustain Ukraine? I mean, Russia's got this defense industry that's kicking in, backed up by Iran, backed up by North Korea, totally sustainable for a number of years. Millions of Russians ready to fight. Ukraine has to knock people on the head, take in 18-year-olds, and they don't have any equipment. So you look at that overview, and then you come down to what's happening on the battlefield, with Russia having the advantage across the entire line of contact. How's this going to end? It can only end one way, with a strategic Russian victory. It's just a question of how many Ukrainians need to die before that victory is achieved. That's the fundamental question. The sooner the war ends, the fewer Ukrainians die. The longer the war goes, the more Ukrainians die. That's it.
Offenbar versucht die ukrainische Führung nach wie vor, einen atomaren Zwischenfall am Kernkraftwerk Saporoschje herbeizuführen. Anfang der Woche fing die russische Luftabwehr mehrere möglicherweise mit Sprengstoff beladene Drohnen ab, die versuchten, zum AKW zu fliegen. Was bezweckt die Ukraine mit derartigen Aktionen? Will sie ernsthaft eine nukleare Katastrophe über ihr Land bringen?
First of all, I think if you you never want to have explosive-filled drones striking any target on a nuclear power plant. I don't think there's a risk of, given the current state of the Saporoschje power plant and how I think the most, if not all, of the reactors have been brought into a sort of a dormant state. I don't think there's a risk of those drones causing a catastrophic incident that's going to destroy Ukraine. It's about perception. It's about Ukraine doing something to create the perception of the potential of a disaster, so that Ukraine needs Europe to intervene. Ukraine needs the United States to intervene. And so they're trying to create conditions under which intervention could be possible. One scenario that Ukraine's always played in is to get an international force deployed to Saporoschje to take control of the nuclear power plant. Once you get international force on the ground, European forces on the ground in Ukraine, that's the camel's nose under the tent, and then the camel will eventually enter the tent, which means you'll have a NATO army in Ukraine, and that's what Ukraine wants. So that's what's going on here. It's trying to create the perception of an emergency that could be used to legitimize foreign troops being placed on Ukrainian soil. And it's not going to work.
Jüngst beschwerte sich der ukrainische Präsident Wladimir Selenskyj gegenüber dem Westen, dass sein Land keine Atomwaffen habe. Im Interview mit dem US-Podcaster Lex Fridman lamentierte Selenskyj, sein Land habe vor 1994 Atomwaffen besessen, diese aber im Budapester Memorandum und im Glauben an Sicherheitsgarantien des Westens abgegeben. Die Resultate seien nun sichtbar. Hätte die Ukraine noch immer Atomwaffen, wäre sie nicht von Russland überfallen worden. Selenskyj resümierte über die USA und Großbritannien, die damals gemeinsam mit Russland als Garantiemächte fungierten: Russland hat sich nicht darum geschert, ebenso wenig wie alle anderen Sicherheitsgaranten. Keiner von ihnen hat sich um dieses Land, diese Menschen, diese Sicherheitsgarantien geschert. Was bezweckt Selenskyj mit derartigen Aussagen? Mit welcher Absicht stößt er Washington und London, seine wichtigsten Verbündeten, vor den Kopf?
Well, he's a desperate man right now, because he faces a desperate situation. And desperate people often, when looking back on how they got to where they are, they revise history. They make things up. I mean, we could take any couple that has had a relationship, and when the relationship falters, pull each one to a side and talk to them, and you'll see that they will just reinvent their relationship. Oh, this person did this. They promised me this. They did that. They did this. Talk to the other person. Well, they did this. They did that. And you just see that, things will be reimagined. And that's what Zelenskyy has done here. He's reimagined a relationship with the West that never existed. Let's start with some basic principles. Ukraine never had nuclear weapons. Straight up statement of fact. Soviet Union had nuclear weapons. But when the Soviet Union broke apart, one of the fundamental preconditions of Ukraine existing was Ukraine rejecting nuclear weapons in totality. So not only did Ukraine never possess nuclear weapons, Ukraine never wanted nuclear weapons. How's that, Zelenskyy? How do you square that one? And Ukraine, signed on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and other international arrangements premised on them not having nuclear weapons. Zelenskyy, how's that working again? Doesn't work too well, does it? But what Ukraine did is, because Ukraine is a nation of corrupt grifters from day one, they sought to leverage their surrender of the nuclear weapons that they didn't possess, that were on their soil, for more economic benefit. And there's a whole series of discussions going back and forth as debt is restructured, as people provide money, as Russia's called in to forgive debt, as Russia's called in to do this and that. It basically poured money into the hands of these corrupt Ukrainian politicians until all the nuclear weapons were off their soil. And then Ukraine tried to leverage this even further with this Budapest memorandum you talk about. But as Zelenskyy himself pointed out, there was never any guarantees. No one guaranteed Ukrainian security. No one ever guaranteed Ukrainian security. Assurances were given, but assurances aren't guarantees. And if you study the way the United States, dealt with that language, it was clear from the start the United States wasn't guaranteeing anything, that Ukraine was trying to blackmail, to strong arm, to get things in, and the United States wasn't playing that game. And the Clinton administration signed that document knowing full well that America would never intervene on behalf of Ukraine decisively the way Ukraine wanted it to, and neither would anybody else. The Russians, on the other hand, again, Russia always gets blamed for everything, but Russia, on the other hand, respected this. This is why Russia, for instance, despite all the provocations of the Ukrainians over the years, never once said the 1991 borders are not legitimate. Russia always, up until 2014, said that the 1991 borders are legitimate. Russia had no intention of imposing its will on Ukraine, of violating Ukrainian sovereignty. It wasn't until Ukraine, at the behest of the West, weaponized Ukrainian nationalism to attack Russian speakers, ethnic Russians, Orthodox Russians, etc., in an ethnic genocide, cultural genocide, that Russia intervened. And then Crimea was absorbed, and now we have 4 more territories absorbed. But that wasn't Russia's strategic objective at any point in time. So the fact is, Zelensky is just right now he's lashing out. He's a captain of a ship whose ship is sunk. He's in the water. His life raft sank, and his life vest is leaking, and he's sitting there thrashing around, blaming everybody but himself for the situation he got into.
Lass uns Zelenskys Argument aufgreifen. Nehmen wir an, das Budapester Memorandum von 1994 hätte nicht stattgefunden. Dann hätte es nachfolgend eine atomar bewaffnete Ukraine gegeben, ebenso wie Weißrussland und Kasachstan. Welche Wendung hätte die Geschichte dann genommen? Hat Zelensky recht damit, dass Russland damit abgeschreckt gewesen wäre, in die Ukraine einzumarschieren?
No, I think the opposite would have happened if Ukraine tried to seize control of nuclear weapons. Russia would have intervened, and Russia told Ukraine, "We will intervene." Russia wasn't going to allow to have a nuclear-armed Ukraine. The world wasn't going to allow that. So Ukraine would have ceased to exist. That's the reality. A precondition of Ukraine's ability to exist as an independent republic was that they would not have nuclear weapons. So if Ukraine decided that they were going to retain nuclear weapons, then that independent republic would not exist. The same would be true for Belarus and Kazakhstan. I mean, it's impossible to go down that route. The United States and Europe weren't going to allow these new republics to have nuclear weapons, and Russia wasn't going to allow them to have nuclear weapons. So it was never going to happen. It's a fantasy on the part of Zelensky in Ukraine, trying to reimagine history in a way that, I guess, forgives their failures. I mean, because that's what's happening here. Instead of having people look at how they got to the situation, what Zelensky said, but if we had nuclear weapons, this would never have happened. But it did happen. And it happened because you're a failure as a leader. But he doesn't want you to talk about those failures. He wants to say, no. This reimagining of history that never was going to happen, premised on things that were never going to happen. If it had happened, even though it was never going to happen, we wouldn't be in this situation today. No, Zelensky, it was never going to happen. You're here today because of your failures. Your failures. You, Zelensky. That's it. But he doesn't want to talk about those failures. I wish the interviewer had done a better job.
Liebe Zuschauer, wenn euch unsere Beiträge gefallen, teilt sie unbedingt in den sozialen Medien. Abonniert unseren Kanal und drückt auf die Glocke, damit ihr keine Veröffentlichung von Gegenpol verpasst.